In this gripping Civil War movie, the United States is torn apart as Texas and California have seceded to form the Western Forces Militia, WF, while Florida creates its own alliance. A third-term president leads the government forces, often appearing on TV to promise victory, crediting the loyalist states for holding the line. But no one believes him, and the WF is closing in on Washington, D.C. Lee, a war photographer, watches the president's speech from her New York hotel room, snapping a picture of the TV. Her attention is soon drawn to a bombing that erupts in the heart of the city. The next day, she and her colleague, journalist Joel, drive downtown to cover a protest where desperate citizens beg for water. Clad in fluorescent vests, Lee immerses herself in the chaos, capturing every tense moment as the crowd pushes back against police. When violence breaks out, Lee remains undeterred, snapping photos amid the turmoil. But when a young photographer named Jessie is injured, Lee pulls her to safety. Jessie, a fan of Lee's work, is shaken but determined to continue. As Lee gives Jessie her vest, she spots an armed woman charging into the crowd with an American flag. Realizing what's about to happen, Lee pushes Jessie down just before an explosion devastates the scene, killing nearly all the protesters. In the aftermath, Jessie is deafened and in shock, but Lee is already back at work, documenting the carnage. Jessie, unwilling to be outdone, forces herself to take a photo as well. Later, back at the hotel where journalists have gathered, Lee and Joel discuss their next steps with their mentor, Sammy, while Lee uploads her images despite the unreliable Wi-Fi. Rumors swirl of a massive attack planned for July 4th, meant to mark a symbolic blow, though no one knows if they should believe it. When the power goes out again, a common occurrence since the war began, the hotel's generator kicks in. Sammy prods the duo about their plan, eventually learning they intend to drive through the war-torn country to reach Washington, D.C., not to cover the front lines, but to secure the first interview with the president in over 14 months. Journalists attempting to approach the White House are often shot on sight. Sammy calls their plan reckless, but when he shares a route to D.C., Lee realizes he might be planning to join them on the dangerous journey. Sammy reveals that his real destination is the front lines in Charlottesville, Virginia, and he needs a ride. Initially, Lee and Joel are hesitant. Sammy's age makes them doubt his ability to keep up in such dangerous circumstances. Despite their concerns, Lee ultimately agrees to take him. As Lee heads toward the 10th floor of the hotel, the receptionist warns her that the building's power outages make using the elevator risky. At that moment, Jessie appears, returning the fluorescent vest Lee had lent her. Lee insists she keep it and advises her to get a helmet for future assignments. Jessie, inspired by Lee's career, admits she's been a regular photographer up until now and is striving to become a war photographer. Lee is her role model. Later, in the solitude of her hotel room, Lee takes a bath, trying to wash away the weight of the horrors she's witnessed in numerous wars. The haunting images of death, destruction, and torture flood her mind, reminding her of all the suffering she captured through her lens without being able to help the victims. The next morning, as the group prepares to leave, Lee is shocked to see Jessie sitting in the car. Furious, she confronts Joel, accusing him of hypocrisy for bringing Jessie along when they'd agreed to drop Sammy in Charlottesville. Joel fires back, pointing out Lee's double standards. She's fine bringing Sammy, who can't run, but won't extend the same chance to a young journalist, even though Lee herself started out at Jessie's age. With no arguments left, Lee reluctantly agrees, but only if Jessie is dropped off with Sammy in Charlottesville. As they depart the city, Sammy reminds Jessie to stay observant, warning her that the roads are littered with abandoned and wrecked cars, requiring them to navigate carefully. When they reach a military checkpoint, soldiers inspect their journalist IDs before allowing them through. During the journey, Sammy and Joel discuss potential questions for the president, like the disbanding of the FBI and the use of airstrikes on American citizens. Soon, they come across a gas station guarded by 3 armed men. Desperate for fuel, they risk stopping. At first, the men refuse to share, but when Lee offers extra payment in Canadian currency, they relent. As they refuel, Jessie spots something unsettling in the distance and goes to investigate, followed by one of the guards. Alarmed, Lee follows them. To Jessie's horror, she discovers 2 men strung up by their wrists, brutally tortured but still alive. The guard explains they were looters, and his group has been debating what to do with them for days. He offers Jessie the power to decide their fate, but she freezes in shock. Sensing the tension, Lee distracts the guard by making him pose for a photo with the tortured men, capturing the grim scene through her lens. Later, back on the road, Jessie confesses her frustration. She didn't take a single photo during the earlier incident and wonders if she should have tried to help. The others reassure her that this is part of the life of a journalist, warning that things will only get worse. Overwhelmed, Jessie cries but promises to be braver in the future. As the group continues their journey, they hear more empty speeches from the president on the radio, with destruction all around them. Bodies litter the streets, but something unusual catches Lee's attention, prompting her to ask Joel to stop the car. Lee then takes Jessie to a fallen helicopter, encouraging her to capture some compelling shots. While photographing, Jessie apologizes for feeling like a burden and explains that her old-fashioned camera once belonged to her father, who is currently hiding out on his farm, pretending the war isn't happening. She then asks Lee if she would photograph her if she ever got shot. Lee, instead of answering, lets Jessie come to her own conclusions. That evening, they stop to rest, watching gunfire in the distance. Lee reflects on how, in the past, covering wars felt like sending a warning home to others. Now the violence is right at their doorstep. Sammy senses that Lee is losing faith in the power of journalism, which is why she's been so hard on Jessie. Meanwhile, Joel reassures Jessie, telling her it's normal if she can't sleep after witnessing such horrors, and offers his support. That night, they sleep outside like campers, surrounded by the sounds of war. The next day, they head to the area where they saw the gunfire the previous night. Lee and Jessie take countless photos as two opposing groups exchange fire, with a man trapped in the middle. A team throws a smoke grenade to create cover, but the man is shot as soon as he tries to run. His blood captured by Jessie's camera as he's dragged to safety by his teammates. Despite their efforts, the man's wounds prove fatal, and Jessie documents his death. Following the team into a nearby building, the journalists witness a wounded man begging for help, only to be shot down in cold blood. Jessie watches in stunned silence as the soldiers search the building. By the end, Joel is casually chatting and laughing with one of the fighters, as if it were just another day at work. The soldiers then capture a few enemies and take them out for execution. Jessie, growing more accustomed to her role, photographs every moment. Sometime later, the journalists arrive at a crowded refugee camp. With all the tents occupied, they're forced to sleep in their car. That evening, the group relaxes with other refugees around a campfire, enjoying a rare moment of calm before returning to the grim reality the next morning. As they continue their journey, the journalists witness more of the relentless death and destruction that litters the roads. Eventually, they reach a town that seems untouched by the war, with people casually strolling the streets as if nothing is wrong. They stop at a clothing store, where Jessie convinces Lee to try on a dress, teasing her that even in war, she can still enjoy nice things. Lee reluctantly agrees, and Jessie snaps a picture of her smiling. Afterward, Lee returns to Sammy, who notes the presence of armed men on the rooftops. He jokes that this kind of peaceful life wouldn't suit them anyway. It would be too boring. Sometime later, the group stumbles upon an abandoned circus with a dead body lying in the road. Joel decides to drive forward, but as soon as they pass under the circus arch, their car window is shattered by a gunshot. In a panic, Joel speeds up, running over the body as he searches for a safe spot. They finally stop near a truck, where they find two camouflaged soldiers. The soldiers are lying in wait for the shooter in a nearby house to reveal themselves. The journalists take cover, but they're eager to document the unfolding situation. Jessie and Lee snap photos while Joel tries to interview the soldiers, asking which side they and the shooter are on. To their surprise, the soldiers explain they don't belong to any faction. They're just two guys trying to kill someone who's trying to kill them. After some tense waiting, the soldiers manage to take down the shooter, allowing the journalists to leave safely. Not long after, they notice a car speeding up behind them, causing fear to ripple through the group. Lee slows down to let the car pass, but instead, the vehicle pulls up alongside them, and a man yells, startling everyone. It turns out to be a prank. Inside the car are Tony and Bohai, fellow journalists and friends of Joel. Tony, excited to see them, reveals that Joel had gotten drunk at the hotel and told him where they were headed. Tony is so thrilled to join them that he climbs through their car window and squeezes in, claiming they're more fun than his current ride. Jessie, eager to join the fun, mimics Tony's move and leaps into the other car. Bohai, amused, decides he likes Jessie more than Tony and speeds off, leaving the rest of the group behind. Lee is immediately worried, despite Tony reassuring her that Bohai is trustworthy. However, when they lose sight of Bohai's car up ahead, Lee's anxiety worsens. Suddenly, a military vehicle races toward them, forcing Lee to veer off the road to avoid a collision. She manages to stop just inches from crashing into a tree. Regaining their composure, they quickly return to the road and soon find Bohai's car abandoned near a farm. its doors wide open. They cautiously investigate and are horrified to discover that Bohai and Jesse have been captured by loyalist gunmen. The two are on their knees, forced to watch as bodies are dumped into a massive grave. Sammy, observing the scene, points out that these aren't regular soldiers, they're operating secretly. Joel, however, believes their journalist credentials will protect them. With that hope, Lee, Joel, and Tony approach the gunmen and explain that Bohai and Jesse, they claim they're simply journalists headed to Charlottesville to cover a story. But without a word, the lead gunman shoots Bohai, leaving Jesse frozen in shock, while Tony breaks down in tears. The gunman then asks where they're from, and as Lee, Joel, and Jesse name their home states, Tony reveals he's from Hong Kong. In response, the gunman shoots him too. Panic erupts as the group scrambles for their lives. Out of nowhere, Sammy drives the car into the gunmen, knocking them into the grave. In the chaos, Jesse slips and falls into the pile of corpses, forcing her to climb over them in a desperate attempt to escape. Joel pulls her out, and the group hurriedly jumps back into the car, fleeing while a remaining gunman fires at them from behind. Back on the road, both Jesse and Joel are overwhelmed by the trauma of what just happened. Jesse breaks down, vomiting from the shock, while Joel tries to suppress his emotions. After driving only a mile or two, Sammy announces he can't go any further. It's then that the group realizes Sammy has been shot. They carefully move him to the back seat, with Joel taking the wheel. Determined to save him, Joel speeds through a burning forest, pushing the car to its limits as flames lick at the road ahead. The group finally reaches the WF military base in Charlottesville, where the flag only bears 2 stars. Tragically, Sammy has already passed away. Joel, consumed with grief and frustration, yells into the wind as soldiers carry Sammy's body away in a box. Lee stares at a photo she took of Sammy's lifeless body, but deletes it after a moment of reflection. Shortly after, they hear from fellow journalists that most of the loyalist forces have surrendered, leaving Washington, D.C. practically defenseless except for a few stragglers. Later, as Lee washes Sammy's blood off the car, the trio decides to follow the WF soldiers into D.C. to cover their assault on the White House. As the WF troops storm the Lincoln Memorial, the journalists stay close, capturing the action. Jesse snaps several intense photos while Lee becomes paralyzed by PTSD. Joel manages to pull her back into focus just as a tank and helicopter clear their path, enabling them to press forward. The soldiers take up positions on rooftops, establishing a line of defense. The journalists, hiding behind an armored car, continue documenting the battle. Suddenly, an explosion forces the armored vehicle to speed off, leaving the group exposed. They sprint for cover, but Jesse lags behind, engrossed in capturing a powerful image of a man engulfed in flames. Lee continues to struggle emotionally, even breaking down in tears, forcing Joel to push her along. The group spots Secret Service agents escorting the president out of the White House and into a convoy of cars. 3 vehicles speed away, only to crash as WF soldiers surround them and ruthlessly eliminate everyone inside. Jesse, always in photographer mode, captures every moment. However, Lee suspects it's a decoy. She drags Joel and Jesse toward the White House, hoping to find the real president. A few soldiers notice and follow them inside. Once inside, they are met with a grim scene. A few bodies scattered around, but no sign of the president. As the soldiers push further into the White House, they stumble upon a Secret Service agent in the conference room. She surrenders and pleads for the president's life, asking for his safe exile to a neutral country. Her request falls on deaf ears, and the soldiers coldly gun her down before continuing their relentless search. Gunfire erupts in the hallways, and the journalists race to document the chaos. With each loyalist soldier that falls, Jesse captures it all, but she takes a bold risk, standing in the open to snap a picture of the carnage. Suddenly, enemy forces prepare to fire, and Lee leaps in front of Jesse, shielding her from the bullets. Lee is shot multiple times, collapsing right in front of Jesse. Shocked and devastated, Jesse instinctively takes photos of Lee's death. They rush to the Oval Office, where the soldiers have finally cornered the president. Before they can finish the job, Joel demands one final quote. The desperate president, cornered and terrified, mutters, "Don't let them kill me." Satisfied, Joel gives the signal and the soldiers execute the president, marking the end of the Civil War. Jesse's final photo captures the victorious soldiers posing beside the president's lifeless body, treating it like a prize from a hunt. The war is over. The end. Thanks for watching.